The public version says UFOs are unexplained. Maybe weather balloons, maybe experimental aircraft, maybe misidentified objects. Governments deny, deflect, and delay. Corporations stay silent. But what if that version is just the surface layer? What if, for decades, the most powerful corporations on Earth have been sitting on technology that doesn't belong to this planet? Not experimenting with it, not studying it, but actively hiding it. Tonight, we're going to break down the theory that a shadow network of defense contractors, private corporations, and government agencies has been suppressing alien technology. And more importantly, why? Let's start with the core question. If alien technology exists, why wouldn't we know about it? The default assumption is that governments would control that information. But that's outdated thinking. Governments change, administrations rotate, officials leak, corporations don't. Corporations are designed for continuity. They don't die. They don't get voted out. They don't answer to the public in the same way governments do. And when you look at how highly classified projects actually operate, a pattern starts to emerge. Black projects, those deeply classified programs, are often outsourced. Not fully run by the government, but handled through private contractors. Why? Because it creates distance. Distance from oversight. Distance from transparency laws. Distance from accountability. If something goes wrong, or if something needs to stay hidden, the structure itself protects it. So now imagine this: a crash retrieval occurs. Not speculation, just follow the logic. An object is recovered that is clearly not conventional. It doesn't match any known adversary. Its materials, propulsion, or energy systems are beyond current human capability. Who handles it? Not a public agency. It gets transferred into a compartmentalized program. Pieces of it get distributed. Not one centralized facility, but multiple private entities. Each one gets a fragment. Each one is told just enough to work on their piece, but never enough to see the whole. This is called compartmentalization, and it's one of the most effective ways to keep something hidden in plain sight. Now ask yourself, if even a fraction of that is true, what would those corporations actually have? We're talking about technology that could redefine energy, propulsion systems that don't rely on fossil fuels, materials that don't degrade the way ours do, potentially even ways to manipulate gravity, time, or space in ways we don't fully understand. If that sounds extreme, consider the implications from a purely economic standpoint. If a company suddenly revealed a breakthrough energy source that made oil obsolete overnight, what happens? Entire industries collapse. Markets destabilize. Geopolitical power shifts instantly. Countries built on resource control lose their leverage overnight. The global financial system, structured around scarcity, gets disrupted at its core. So instead of releasing that technology, what if it's suppressed? Not destroyed, not ignored. Just slowly integrated. Dripped out over decades in forms that don't raise suspicion. Micro advancements that feel like natural progress. Instead of one massive leap that exposes everything. Let's connect that to something you already see. Technological progress doesn't always move at a consistent pace. There are moments where it jumps, and moments where it feels stalled. Think about how rapidly computing advanced in certain periods, or how materials science suddenly introduces something that seems slightly ahead of its time. Now imagine that some of those advancements aren't purely organic, but derived, reverse engineered, adapted from something we didn't originally create. Not fully understood, but partially replicated. That would explain why progress sometimes feels uneven, because it isn't a straight line. It's a puzzle being solved piece by piece. But here's where it gets more interesting. If corporations are sitting on this level of technology, why keep it secret from each other? Why not collaborate? Because information is power. If one corporation gains even a slight edge from this kind of technology, it becomes dominant, not just in its industry, but potentially across multiple sectors. Energy, defense, transportation, communications, everything converges. So instead of open collaboration, you'd get controlled competition. Multiple corporations working on fragments of the same underlying truth, without full visibility. without full context, each one racing without realizing what the finish line actually looks like. Now let's address the skepticism, because this kind of idea sounds like a conspiracy, and most conspiracies fall apart under scrutiny. But the strongest ones don't rely on wild claims. They rely on incentives. So forget aliens for a second. Focus on incentives. Would corporations hide a technology that disrupts their own revenue streams? Yes. Would defense contractors operate in extreme secrecy with minimal oversight? Yes. Would governments prefer plausible deniability for programs they can't fully control? Yes. Would compartmentalization prevent leaks even among people working on the same project? Yes. You don't need aliens to justify the structure. The structure already exists. The question is simply what it's being used for. Now bring aliens back into the equation, not as a sci-fi concept, but as an unknown variable. If even one non-human craft has ever been recovered, the implications are massive. It means we're not alone. It means our understanding of physics is incomplete. And it means someone, somewhere, has access to technology that leapfrogs our current civilization. That kind of knowledge doesn't just get released. It gets controlled. Because whoever controls it, controls the future. There's another layer most people don't consider. Legal ownership. If a corporation is in possession of something that isn't human-made, who owns it? Is it government property? Corporate property? Something else entirely? There's no clear legal framework for non-human technology, which creates a gray zone. And gray zones are where power consolidates. Because if something isn't clearly regulated, it can be quietly controlled. Let's talk about whistleblowers. Because if this were real, wouldn't someone come forward? Some have. But here's the issue: credibility. If someone claims knowledge of alien technology, they're immediately categorized, dismissed, discredited, even if they're telling the truth. That's another layer of protection. You don't need to silence everyone. You just need to make sure no one is believed. And then there's the cultural factor. For decades, UFOs have been associated with fringe communities. Conspiracies, sci-fi, speculation. That wasn't accidental. It creates a built-in filter. Serious professionals don't want to risk their reputation engaging with the topic. So the conversation stays on the edges, which is exactly where you'd want it if you were trying to keep something hidden. Now step back and look at the full picture. You have a system built for secrecy, corporations designed for long-term control, technologies that would disrupt global power structures, and a cultural narrative that discourages serious inquiry. Even without definitive proof, the alignment is hard to ignore. But here's the real question. What happens if it eventually comes out? Not in a slow drip, but all at once. Confirmed, documented, undeniable. The impact wouldn't just be technological, it would be psychological. Everything people believe about reality would shift. Trust in institutions would collapse. Markets would react unpredictably. And the entities that held that information would have to answer for it. Which is why, if this is real, disclosure wouldn't happen suddenly. It would be managed, gradual, controlled, introduced in a way that minimizes disruption. Because the truth isn't just about what exists. It's about how people react when they find out. So where does that leave us? Somewhere in between certainty and speculation, but leaning toward a possibility that's more grounded than it first appears. Because when you strip away the sensationalism, what you're left with is a simple dynamic. Power protects itself. Information is power. And the most valuable information is the kind no one else has access to. The idea that corporations could be hiding alien technology sounds extreme. But the mechanisms required to do it already exist. And they've existed for a long time. So the real question isn't, is this too crazy to be true? It's, if it were true, would we even be able to tell? And maybe the most unsettling part of all is that the answer might be no. Not because the truth isn't out there, but because it's been carefully structured so that even if you're looking right at it, you still don't see it. If you've made it this far, you're already thinking differently than most people. And that's where this kind of topic starts to matter. Not in proving it outright, but in understanding how systems of power operate and what they're capable of hiding. Because whether it's alien technology or something else entirely, the pattern is the same. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. That's where we'll leave it for today. But the next question you should be asking is, if something like this is being hidden, what else is? And more importantly, who benefits from you never finding out?